coming that way, and they met a van, and they said, pull off. And about that.
Today is July.
And another one come in that way, and they met a van, and they said, pull off. And about that.
Today is July 24th,
We.
1986.
Yes.
This is Joe Todd, and interview with Mr. Frank Jelly Clark in Meeker, Oklahoma.
There you go.
Sir, where were you born?
St. Joe, Missouri. January the 29th, 1895.
Who is your father?
John F. Clark.
And your mother?
Clara C. Clara C. Clark.
What was her maiden name?
Zagrodzky. Zagrodzky. Clara Zagrodzky. Indicating
where are your parents from?
they was born, mother was born in St. Joe and dad was born 8 miles out. So they both born in St. Joe. That's their town.
What type of work your father did?
He's a farmer.
Farmer?
Killed squirrels every morning, you know, went up the mulberry tree and killed squirrels. He shot once, he come in at the squirrel.
Did you know your grandparents?
Yeah, Jesse Clark and Lucy. But I just saw Lucy. I never did see either one of my grandparents. I just saw Lucy, and she was sitting there and had a clay pipe, and she was lit it with a coal out of the stove, and she pushed her glasses up on her forehead, and she had one tooth below that was anti-sky godly. You know, red slanting. If your teeth ever ache, they pull them, and she just like one running out. she didn't have enough teeth.
Were either one of your grandfathers in the Civil War?
I don't think either one of them was.
They weren't. Good. As a small boy, what chores did you do at the farm?
What did I enjoy at the farm?
What chores did you do at the
Oh,
farm?
all of them. I carried in wood and cobs, put that and kept the wood box full, and then when I got a little bigger, I would milk the cows and feed the horses. And Mother always wanted me to check the other boys' cows because I would milk them clean and they'd leave a little, and that turns the cow dry. I was old trusty Jelly. I would milk her all out, and I was a nice guy about the place.
How many cows did you have to milk?
Oh, about 2. We didn't have it about 6. That's all you had them days. There wasn't any 50 and 100. If you had 4, that's about all you needed, 4 or 6. And horses about the same thing. But at one time we had 23 head of horses and mules, colts, at one time. And I always drove a double team to the buggy because if you drove 2, that's the same as a Cadillac. And we had a pasture full of horses, didn't cost any more. I had a Cadillac. I drove 2. They'd hold the road a little better and the buggy rode easier because they stayed in the track. If you drove 1, that buggy would be doing this all the time, jumping up and down. But
what type of buggy did you have?
Moon Brothers.
Was that the best wagon? The best buggy?
Just 1 seat, of course, and a young fellow wanted a narrow bed. And if you was married, you got a wider bed, so you put in a sack of flour and some more stuff. But if a guy was chasing him, he wanted a narrow bed, a narrow seat. It just looked a little more uptown. And you would jump out when you drove up. You just jumped clear out over the wheel and light out there like a cat. And then you went around and picked up with your kid gloves on. We wore kid gloves. You'd pick up the back of the buggy with her in it and just set the whole business over. Buggy, her, wheels and all. Just pick it up and set it over so she could get out easy between the wheels. You lifted these wheels over and stuff out. And you helped them out. And the main thing was to show them that you were stout. You just pick up that buggy and set it over like a cracker. Which might be all you could lift, but never let on.
Now, speaking of buggies, what maintenance did you have to perform on the buggy?
Well, the Clark boys always kept them clean. If they went to see a girl, they washed the buggy before they went. They didn't drive in with the buggy with mud on it. Them spokes was glistening. And our buggy whip always stood straight up. A lot of the boys had them come up and just lop over like a wilted sunflower. When you get in at 12 o'clock at night, whatever time you come in, 10 or 12, you took that buggy whip out and went over and hung it up on a nail with that cracker on the top, and it hung straight. Then when you went 3 days later to make another trip, you didn't go every night, that was out. Once a week, you got that buggy whip, unhooked it, and stuck it back in there, and she's standing straight up just like the day you bought it. And when you drove up in the gal's yard, if they knew anything, they knew they had something. If this old boy come driving up and his whip slopped over the mud on his buggy, he might get canned. They might send him, she might not get to come back. But we always got to come back and warn him.
Besides washing the buggy, what else did you have?
Well, you grease them quite often, not very expensive. A dime can of axle grease would last a year. And a trip a lot of times would cost you a nickel or 3 cents. You drove your horse and buggy over to see you down and back. Your trip didn't cost you too much. It was what axle grease you used and the wear on the harness. Mounted with.
Did the buggy have rubber or metal tires?
We had metal tires then, but my brother had one that had rubber tires, but I never did. They didn't pull any easier, and you wasn't in town enough to need the rubber.
How did you keep the metal tires tight?
They stayed tight. They stayed tight until about the 4th year. If you let them set out, they'd rattle. But we always kept ours in the barn, and they never did rattle. If they got to where they got that way, we sold it and got a new one.
And what about the wagon? What type of wagon did you have?
We had a Mitchell wagon, and we bought it from Harry Mead, Shawnee, Oklahoma Territory.
How much?
In 1901.
What was the price?
$65.
Now, when you buy a new wagon, what is standard equipment on a wagon when you buy it?
Well, it's the front and back wheels, tongue, and neck yoke, and all that stuff, and the bed and the sideboards. It puts it up 26 inches high. The bottom bed is about 14 inches, and the other is about 12 or 10. The sideboards slip right over the top. Then, if you wasn't hauling corn or grain, you just lift the top, take the top off, and you just had the bed there. You put the spring wagon on that, and you all went to church or town, wherever.
How many bushels of grain did you haul? With the sideboards?
I'd hold about 60 bushels of wheat and about 40 bushels of oats. Wheat was part of it, heavier than oats. But oats about 40 bushels to the wagon, but wheat should get is 60 bushels.
Does the price include the bows and the wagon sheet?
No, we didn't have that. We didn't have the bows or the sheet.
You didn't?
Didn't need them.
Why?
We wasn't traveling, we wasn't going anywhere.
Okay.
And of course, we was going across the country, we need the bows and the wagon sheet, but we had a sheet later to cover the cotton wagon with. But we just took the sheet back, it was going to rain, spread it over the wagon, there wasn't any bows, we just spread it across the wagon, kept the cotton dry. That's the only time we ever did.
You explained the maintenance on the buggy. What about the wagon?
There was no cost to it. It just, the wheels stayed tight for 20 years. It didn't rattle. Of course, if you keep it going on another 20, why they would, they'd kind of get, the fellas would get loose and the tires would shrink a little off the deal, but ordinarily they stayed put. But this wagon was bought in 1901. Shawnee OT was on the side of the wagon. Harry Mead, Shawnee OT, Oklahoma Territory. And of course, we shoved corn along to the side of that. We sure memorized it. Because we looked at it all the time. You hadn't care for corn, you know, read it.
Who made the best wagon?
I don't know. They had a Bain wagon and the Mitchell, and I don't know of any other brands right now that I can call to memory.
Well, Studebaker made a wagon.
There was Studebaker, yeah, that was a good one. I remember the Studebaker car come out, it was a good one too. That was a good outfit. But if Harry Mead handled the Mitchell, why Roebuck up 3 blocks up handled the Bain or the Studebaker, yeah. Each one, they just had one brand. And if you bought that. Of course, when Dad come to this country, he come down on the train from St. Joe to Oklahoma City, then down to Shawnee on the Rock Island. Then he walked uptown and bought a team of mules at the mule barn. Went right on to the hardware store and got a set of harness and put on the mules. Bought the wagon and hooked them up and got in and drove out to the farm 6 miles north.
Okay, let me
That's
back
how he
up.
got home.
Let me back up. Why did your parents come to Oklahoma?
On account of Father's health, he had kind of a blood disease. He'd break out occasionally, and I was the only one that would do that. I had inherited the same disease. About once a year, I'd get sick and get peel off right on your fingernails. It kind of puff up there and just peel back and peel it off. Blood disease, and he come to this country and only lived about a year, just a year. He come in January 1901 and died February the 2nd, 1902. And my mother lived a widow for 65 years. Never looked at a man. There were plenty of them then. There was just gobs of them. There wasn't a shortage of men until after World War II.
Do you remember the trip to Oklahoma?
Oh yeah.
Tell me about it.
We come on the train. Dad and the two older boys. My sister come on ahead, and they was here and was out living on the farm. They bought the farm and was out there. We had a windmill and a milk house and fixed up fairly well. Dad gave $3,200 for the 160. And Mother and Aunt Laura and Roy, we come on the train by ourselves a little later. My baby sister was only 2 months old, and she kind of held the deal up. So I come on the last train, and the conductor, not the conductor, but the news butcher was coming through the train with a whole platter of oranges. He passed them to my Uncle George, and he didn't take any. I said if he'd have passed them to me, I'd have took one. They was a dime a piece, you know, it was high. That was an hour's work, and a fellow wouldn't buy one. But I thought if he'd passed me, I just took one.
Do you remember Oklahoma City in 1901?
Yes.
Tell me.
We come in there and got into Oklahoma City about 6:30 in the morning. It was light, and they just sat inside, and I was loitering around outside. I could hear that telegraph thing going, whackety, 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 whack, and I went quite a little ways up from the side of the depot, as far as I thought I'd better go, and then I'd come back. But Oklahoma City at that time was about the size of, oh, I guess a little bigger than, no, I didn't any bigger than Tecumseh is today. Couldn't have been. The depot was there and there's nothing around it, and that was right downtown.
What did the train depot look like?
Well, it was just about 3 rooms, all wood structure in Oklahoma City. Come to Oklahoma City, the Rock Island was the same thing, but the Santa Fe was built in 1903, and it's the prettiest station in Oklahoma.
Where was the depot located where you got off?
In Shawnee?
No, in Oklahoma City.
In Oklahoma City, I don't remember the street, but it was on that Santa Fe that come from Wichita, St. Joe to Topeka, Park City, and to Oklahoma City. It didn't come down through Meeker then. There wasn't any. That was the main line to Oklahoma City, and then we got on the Rock Island, changed trains there, and come on to Shawnee.
What did Shawnee look like in 1901?
Well, it wasn't any bigger than Chandler is right now. It's dirt streets. It stayed dirt streets for 3 years. And when me and Dad would drive that red mule to Shawnee, we'd go down Kickapoo because it was higher, and the road was straighter, and the lower road was sandier and rocky, and nobody lived on it much that knew anything, so we just went down Kickapoo. We'd drive that red mule down to OBU, or where OBU is now, and there wasn't any OBU there and nothing else but the prairie grass, but we angled from there right across to Broadway, and we come out at the other corner of the quarter section. It was a mile across there, just a trail for 2 wagons, for 2 wheels to go, and the mule just went on. And after we got over to Broadway, it was just a mile on down to Main Street, and that's all the town there was then, was that mile from there down. It didn't come out 2 miles. There's just grass out there and no houses. And if show come to town, the show played out there. The showgrounds was out there. There wasn't nothing else out there.
That's Chautauqua?
No, I mean Ringling Brothers.
Oh, okay.
Jingling
I
Brothers.
remember the Chautauqua.
Jingling Brothers. But when we got off the train, they had wrote a card the day before that we would be there, but Dad didn't get it. You only got the mail once a week or twice. You had to go to Shawnee and call for it. And we got off the train, and Dad wasn't there, nobody to meet us. So Mother and us 3 kids just went up to the carriage livery barn and got one of those carriages to take us home for $2.50. He took us 6 miles north and dumped us out. We had 1 grip, maybe 2, a basket or 2, I guess. And that was it. And I went in the house asking where Dad was, and said he was at the barn, so I run on to the barn. I was just 6 years old, about 4 weeks old. He was in there carrying that mule. But we would drive it to Shawnee and tie it up on Main Street to a telephone pole there right in front of the grocery store. The grocery store was the first door west of the Federal National Bank. That's where it is now. It's right there on the north side, 25-foot store, and had the oil barrel out in front, and it was laying down. He wasn't setting up, it was laying down. And you drawed your coal oil out of the end. They didn't have that in there because that coal oil would smell up the potatoes, you know, and stuff, flour. And we traded there.
What was the price of coal oil?
10 cents a gallon.
10 cents a gallon.
Yeah, I sold it.
How long would that gallon last?
It'd last a week if you didn't build fires with it or more. If you built fires with it, it didn't last very long. But Mother always had to kill and didn't waste coal.
How often did you go to Shawnee?
Every week. We tried to go once a week. And we would go and call for Scheitz's mail. Then if he went through the middle of the week, he'd go to the office and call for our mail. And you got it. You just lined up on Broadway. I think the post office was on Broadway, about half a block up from Main, on the west side. And they'd line up and go and get their mail, and that would get his mail, and he'd step aside and push one up there. There'd be a line maybe out to the edge of the door, 10 or 12 people. But you call for your neighbor's mail and get it. Then in 1903, when the Santa Fe was surveyed from Ark City through Meeker and through our farm down here and on to Shawnee, in 1903, we sold them the right-of-way, 7 acres, for $650. It went just kind of in its sky garden a little bit, not much, but didn't go straight to it. And we took that money and built a 6-room house, and $115 for a champion binder. And might have had $1 or $2 left. That's close. That's about it. But we had a nice 6-room house there, as good as anybody had.
When you first moved on the farm, what type of house did you have?
2-room house.
Was it frame?
Frame, 2-room wood house. There wasn't but 6, 8, 9 of us solo was in there. And the 2 rooms. But my neighbor had 2 rooms, and they had 11 in there, and 2 bread plates and 2 gravy bowls and 2 potato bowls. If you just had 1 bread plate, by the time the biscuit plate went around, the last guy didn't get any. So they had 2 bread plates up there. We thought this funny. We never did have but 1. Of course, Aunt Laura was the baby. We really just had 8 in the family, mother and father and 6 kids.
Were there any saloons in Shawnee?
Shawnee was full of them. There was about every other door on the north side was a saloon, but not many on the south side. But
Why?
the north side, well, it seems like the south side is the best location for business. You know, there's Crest and Woolworth, and Monkey Ward's always on the south side. If it's down in Oklahoma, it's the proper side. It's the shady side in summertime. And the winters are mild, and it don't make it any. So the saloons, it didn't matter. They didn't. Men would get over there, and there wouldn't be so many going by watching you go in and out. And I was there the day before statehood.
I was going to ask about
1907.
statehood.
Excuse me.
1907, I was there. I'd got to go to town that day to get a pair of shoes, I guess, in the fall of the year to get shoes. And I got to go, and I would have been 12 years old in 1907, yeah. 1910, I was 10, yeah. I was 12. And they had the doors open to the saloons on the north side all along there. The doors just open. You see the fellas standing in there with their feet up on the brass, just turning that beer up a nickel a glass. Just try and drink it all, because tomorrow there wouldn't be any. And I think they about drank it all. It looked like, of course I was small, I couldn't get in. But
Were there many drunks that night in Shawnee?
oh, no, they didn't get drunk on beer. They didn't get drunk once then anyhow. They never did. They always had all they could drink, and they didn't. No, it was reasonably quiet.
Were you in town on statehood day in Shawnee?
All day, yeah, but had to come before night. We'd come on home done the milk and chores.
Was there a big celebration on statehood day in Shawnee?
No, you couldn't have told it. They were just had the saloon doors open, trying to drink all they could. The rest of it was very quiet. Everything was all right. That railroad come through in 1903, and when it did, that shut out you going to Shawnee and calling at the post office for your mail, because the train brought the mail through to Shawnee and it started the routes. Come out on Route 3 and cut your mail. When that train come, it carried the mail. It had 2 baggage coaches and had a fellow in there that sorted mail all the time. He picked up mail at every station and sorted and kicked it off the next one. So that's how it shortened up things, and they paved Main Street in Shawnee in 1903 and put in the streetcar. When the Santa Fe Railroad come through, then they began to wake up and put in a streetcar, because the streetcar went down Main and you used to miss the Santa Fe Depot about a good block. And if you got off that, you could start walk the streetcar right in rural town for a nickel. Made a good deal. But there was a lot of saloons on the north side. I don't know how many, but it seemed like they'd be about 3 to the block. There was a lot of them on the north side. And I remember that quite well.
Do you know if where did they get the whiskey for the saloons? Was it
The
brought
whiskey?
in? Yeah,
Oh, they hauled a team and wagon from Oklahoma City.
from Oklahoma City. Yeah.
They perhaps made it up there. If they didn't, they had to haul it out of Kentucky, or ship it out of Kentucky. They'd ship it out of Kentucky to Kansas City or St. Louis, and then ship it to Oklahoma City. And then it could come down to the Rock Island, Shawnee. But before, they'd have to haul it with ox cart or a team and wagon. I didn't see an ox cart. They had them before I got here, but they had them.
On the farm, what were the main crops you raised on the farm?
Oats and cotton. We was on the prairie there, and we'd put in about 35 acres of oats every year, and that would fill a whole big granary and it'd feed your stock the whole year. We raised enough, and then we'd sell oats. People from Meeker would come down and buy oats from Clark's. I remember that was old John Taylor and his dad and Loader too.
Would you describe
And cotton and corn didn't grow too good on the prairie.
Would you describe the process of chopping cotton?
Yeah, you could plant cotton on a level, or if it didn't hurt if you put it on a little hill, and the ground was level, and you just furr a little fur out, or plant it on the level. You go right with a 1-horse planter and plant it in just a little ditch, and you put the seed real thick, so it just come up just like that, like clover, to get a good stand. And then you come along and chopped it out and had a stalk about ever that far, a little over a foot, about 14 inches between stalks. You take your whole on and you just knock them out and skip one and go right on and skip another one. And you got pretty good hitting that hole. Of course, if it was grass, you had trouble. And there's a lot of grass there too, the weeds. And you chop that out. And then pretty soon you got on up that high and a little higher, and you could cultivate it. But you usually chopped it about twice, but the second time was a lot easier because the stalks was already thinned out. It was bigger, and you could go much faster.
What type of cotton did you plant?
Well, Mebane was the best seed, and I don't remember any other name with the Mebane cotton seed. But corn, I don't know the names of that. But cotton was just, we always tried to get good seed. We'd use maybe our seed a couple of years, and then the next year we'd get seed from the neighbor, another strain further over the river bottom maybe.
How much cotton did you pick one day?
200 was the limit. I don't think I ever got 200. I'd get 100 in the morning and maybe 100 in the evening, but it was hard for me to get 200. I never worked too hard at it. I figured there'd be a tomorrow. But a lot of people didn't know the difference.
How long was your cotton sack?
Cotton sack, they run from 6 to 8 feet.
What were they made of?
Canvas,
Canvas?
ducking.